That was nice from Achyutan Prabhu. Thank you for bringing back this whole memories. Now our next speaker is going to be His Holiness Bhakti Vigna Vinasana Narasimha Swami Maharaj. Maharaj was initiated by Srila Prabhupada in London 1971. A year later, he received second initiation. Maharaj has been extensively preaching for our last 25 years in Asian countries such as India, Philippines, China, Taiwan, Singapore, Hong Kong, Malaysia, and Thailand. Maharaj spends a lot of time in China. Maharaj can speak fluent Chinese. We have many Chinese disciples. Very inspiring to see Maharaj fearlessly preaching in such indoor countries. Maharaj accepted Sannyasa order in 1994, and he is continuing his Sannyasa for 20 years, and he's been very regular in teaching in Vaishnava Institute, Mayapur and Vrindavan, and many places. Maharaj truly walks his talk. Maharaj has been one of the strong pillars in his fearless preaching in these Asian countries. So we would like to hear from Maharaj what are the different stages of Sannyasa ashram and what he need to be aware of.
Hare Krishna. I'll be speaking about the different stages of sannyas life. So this is mentioned in Prabhupada's purports in Srimad Bhagavatam, also brought up in some lectures on Srimad Bhagavatam. And Srila Prabhupada describes how there are 4 stages to the renounced order of life, sannyas. They are called Kutichak, Bahudak, Prajacharya, and Paramahamsa. The process of entering sannyas will vary a little because some people come directly from Brahmachari life, whereas others will come through the Grihastha ashram. And from Grihastha ashram, then into Vanaprastha, and then take sannyas. So if one is coming from Brahmachari life, then they can go directly into the missionary work. At least they can begin from Bahudak. Because the first stage of sannyas, Kutichak, that is described how one taking sannyas from the family life, leaving the family life, he can build a cottage some distance away from the home, and then the family members will arrange to send food to him. Because he's entering into sannyas life, so he may have some problem getting food for himself, so the family, feeling separation from him, they take the responsibility to arrange to send food to him daily. So in this way, he doesn't have to worry about his eating problem. That's taken care of. So that's the first stage of sannyas, Kuticha. Kuti meaning the home, the house or cottage. And then after he becomes a little more accustomed to being in the sannyas order of life, then he understands that food is available everywhere and that he doesn't need to depend on the family, but he can go and beg some food from other places. That is called Bahudak, the second stage. Bahu meaning many. In one letter, Srila Prabhupada described one of his disciples who he'd initiated as a sannyasi. He said he is on the level of Bahuda. This person who had been initiated as sannyas was claiming some honor or respect from others, but Srila Prabhupada pointed out that he said, this is not proper. He said, within our movement we have brahmacharis and grihastas as well as sannyasis, and if they've dedicated their life and soul for the service of the mission, then they're as good as sannyasis. And a sannyasi cannot demand any honor from them, but they're all prabhus, they're all on the same level. So Srila Prabhupada said that this devotee who is a sannyasi, that he's on the level of Bahudak, and he instructed that he should travel out and he can go and collect from different people. And he told him, you go and collect outside of our society, outside of the devotees. You don't just go to our own people, but you go outside to meet new people, try to introduce them to Krishna consciousness, give them a chance to do some service for the Krishna consciousness movement. So he also told them that you can go and collect money, and the money you collect, you can use it for the development of your project. He was working in New Vrindavan, so he said the money you collect, you use it for the project. But you go outside, you don't go to the people within our movement, you go outside. So like that, you collect a little. If it's just food, then you collect a little food. You don't take a lot. You don't just demand a whole meal from someone, but you go, you take a small portion, whatever little thing they may offer, you accept it. So this is the second stage of sannyas. And then the third stage is Prajacharya. Paribrajak means moving everywhere. So in another letter, Srila Prabhupada described this Paribrajacharya as being the actual first stage of sannyas, that one on the stage of Paribrajacharya, he can go out and travel distant places, and the system was that in the beginning you don't stay more than 3 days in one place. You spend just 3 days. If you spend more than 3 days in any one place, then it becomes a burden for the people. Srila Prabhupada showed this by his own example when he was staying in Nairobi, Kenya. He was staying in the homes of different Indian families, but he would only stay 3 days in each home. After 3 days, pack everything up, move to another home. He said any more than 3 days, then it becomes a burden. So this is Paribrajak Acharya, moving, making some propaganda, distributing the message of Krishna, and not being too much attached to any one place, moving around. So most of our devotees in the Krishna consciousness movement, the sannyasis, they're at that level, they're at that stage, they're traveling around making propaganda. I was reading one quote here, which is from an article in The Harmonist, which came up in a long time ago, 1935, where it was mentioned there, said that the Vaishnavas do not attach a lot of importance to the external formality of the aesthetic order, meaning sannyas, but they consider it merely an ostentatious advantage for propaganda work. Ostentatious advantage for propaganda work. Propaganda work is actually the business of the sannyasi. going out and propagating the Sankirtan movement, introducing people to Krishna consciousness. And ostentatious in the sense that the sannyasi, he's in the saffron robes and he's carrying his tridandi. And so in this way there's some show which attracts the attention of the people. They will give more respect. We know how 500 years ago Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu himself took sannyas in order to get respect from the common people. When there was some problem there with the students were rebelling against him. And so he understood by taking sannyas, then they will have to give proper respect to him. So this is the idea of sannyas, at least at the stage of paribrajak, is moving around, making some propaganda. And then the final stage is paramahamsa. Paramahamsa, at the stage of paramahamsa, then one no longer needs to travel. One can simply stay in one place. Although Srila Prabhupada does say that is not compulsory. They may stay in one place, they may also travel. Oh, I wanted to mention one thing about Srila Prabhupada. He described jet age paribrajacharya. He wrote one letter to a devotee and he was describing his preaching activities. He said, we're in Europe and I will be in Geneva for 1 week. Then I'm going to Paris, and then we will go to Stockholm, and then Germany, then to England. From England, we will go to Los Angeles and attend a festival there. And after the festival, then I'm invited to Rath Yatra in Australia, and we will go to Australia via Hawaii. And then Prabhupada said, this is jet age paribrajak acharya. So, jet age paribrajacharya, this was how Srila Prabhupada termed his traveling around. Of course, Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he was walking everywhere, but the principle of Rupa Goswami is to make use of everything in the service of Krishna. And so the final stage, Paramahamsa, is the final stage of sannyas. One doesn't need to travel, one can simply sit down and his business is just simply chanting the holy name. Of course, he may also be engrossed, absorbed in studying the Paramahamsa Samhita, which is Srimad Bhagavatam, and he is fully satisfied in engaging in these activities. He doesn't have to renounce anything because he sees everything in relation to Krishna. The term Paramahamsa, supreme swan. So the swan is famous for being in the lake with the lotus flowers, and they enjoy sporting with the long stem of the lotus flowers, and the stem becomes wrapped around the neck of the swan. And the same way, Paramahamsa is a swan-like person whose mind is entangled in the stem of the lotus feet of Krishna. Of course, this example was used by Maharaj Kulashekar, a famous verse, well known in South India. Krishna tvadiya pada pankaja panjarantam ajaiva me vishatu manasarajahamsa. So manasarajahamsa, the mind is like the swan, is entangled in the stem of the lotus feet of Krishna. The swan is a very special type of bird. They know the art of separating milk from water. If there's a mixture of milk and water, they can drink the milk and leave the water. So in the same way, the Paramahamsa person, one who is on this final stage of sannyas, they know the art of taking the essence of everything, which is for the service of Krishna. In Srimad Bhagavatam, Srimad Bhagavad Gita, we would say Vanam Janmanamate Jnanavamam Prapad Vasudev Sarvamiti, right? Vasudev Sarvamiti. Paramahamsa, he knows that Krishna, Vasudeva is everything. So this is the Paramahamsa stage. This is the final stage of sannyas, where one is fully dedicated and fully absorbed in the thoughts of Krishna and service to Krishna. There was an incident within our Krishna consciousness movement where Srila Prabhupada awarded a person Babaji initiation. What happened was this Western man, young man, he had been diagnosed as having a fatal disease, and that he could not expect to live for a long time, that soon his death was coming. But he'd been preaching to people, been going to colleges and preaching about how he was preparing for death. So the devotees asked Prabhupada that, you know, can he take sannyas? However, Srila Prabhupada considered that, he said, well, it's not very appropriate somebody's going to take sannyas just because they're going to die. But he said, what he could do, he said, he can take Babaji initiation and he can simply chant Hare Krishna. If his death is imminent, the best use of his time is to absorb it in the chanting of the holy name. So let him go to Mayapur and sit at the banks of the Ganges and chant the holy name and take whatever little prasadam is necessary, and in this way he'll be fully ready for meeting death whenever it comes. So this man was initiated, and Prabhupada explained this Babaji initiation. Naturally, he said this is the final stage of sannyas. And this is the perfectional stage for a sannyasi to take the Babaji order of life. However, once a man was initiated as a Babaji, he spent some time there in Mayapur, but then he went to see another doctor and he got a different opinion. And the doctor told him, no, you don't have to worry, you're not going to die so quickly. So when he heard that, he went back to the West and he gave up spiritual life, he went back to the material world. So when Srila Prabhupada heard this, he said, no more Babaji initiation in ISKCON. He said, that's it, finished. However, we do see Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, when he was retiring from his duties and his life in the world, he went off to Jagannath Puri and he renounced everything and he became like a Paramahamsa. Srila Prabhupada described Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, he was actually Paramahamsa. He could sit and simply absorb himself in the chanting of the holy name. He spent the final years of his life like that, absorbed in chanting of the holy name. Of course, it's also said, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur said that if you can bring a horse and put me on the horse, then you can take me for preaching. So he did have the mood also to continue preaching. And we see Srila Prabhupada also, although Srila Prabhupada wanted to retire in Vrindavan, but he didn't want to stop preaching. And he said, I want the benediction to die on the battlefield. That is glorious. Keep me preaching. So this is the thinking of a sannyasi, someone in the renounced order of life, that they want to continue their missionary activities on behalf of the Lord. Okay, so 4 stages of sannyas. Kutichak, Bahudak, Prajacharya, Paramahamsa. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai.
Thank you very much, Maharaj, for